Hi everyone. I want to start off by saying sorry, not sorry, because I may not look up much whilst I read this bunch of words. I'm going to try, but we'll see. I usually give speeches without them, pushing what I have to share from the heart. Not that the previous opportunities or addresses are not as important, but this is a special day. One that presents with it a special kind of opportunity. Fortunately, I'm not alone with the heavy task of guiding those of you in attendance, of putting teeth to bone on the urgency of how artist-led activism and advocacy can create political and social change. When I was approached a couple of months ago by Natalia, we had a lovely phone conversation. Being honest here, but if most others had approached me regarding this event at such a time in the summer, where I tried to disappear from all things the art scene, I would have looked very squarely at whoever it was I was talking to, most respectfully to say, fuck off. Coming from where I do, you have to learn to protect your space, your peace, your people. But Natalia is a person who I can say is a dear friend and collaborator, who I got to know in her capacity as curator of the Gallowgate, Glasgow, nearly a decade ago. I was commissioned to create a new work and developed a short film titled The Expulsion, which highlights the rich interior world of an unnamed migrant with references to themes of race, class, and gender. In this work, the narrator invokes the energy and memories of a pre-gentrified 1990s East and West London, forcing an imagined viewer to look at what has been made unseen. Cleaners, labourers, janitors, porters, bouncers, and sanitation workers, each attempting to claim their spoils and that which has been spoiled. Across this time, we developed a strong camaraderie around our artistic and cultural interests and experiences. I knew that this was a person who I would want to talk to or would hopefully work with again, should the moons align once more. So whilst my brain has been somewhat frazzled this summer, or all the kinds of versions of speech I would say or not say, I'm deeply grateful to Natalia and the entire AAN team, working tirelessly behind the scenes to make today happen. I'm also not grateful at the same time, as my mind has been whizzing around on and on and on at how to quantify a contribution that will kick off today's symposium. Natalia cannot take the brunt of the blame, however. I know this has something to do with my own form of neurodivergence, which is yet to be diagnosed. The way my mind works, it's like an electric charged pulse. It needs to ride this dynamic of polyrhythms that can rarely be stopped. That's one of the reasons why I do what I do and why I'm me. Here, I am in this single moment, amongst other versions of time strands where I have an opportunity to hopefully contribute something of use. What I'm going to do with this talk is to reach into the rawness, the fuzziness, the fragility, and the grit to relate to the event's pressing topics. Trigger warning, as some of this will open up themes that will be distressing. But to bring forth my contribution, I have to consider the strife and hardship my mother endured. The poverty that she was born into in what was known as the Gold Coast, now known as Ghana, and the constant civil unrest that her and my father narrowly escaped to survive. arriving here on this old island, branded immigrants and other words that I will not utter. I then have to consider the poverty I was raised in. Despite my mother's every effort, her spirit, sweat, blood, bones and sinews, she fused into armor in her fight to try to give me and my siblings the best that she could as a single parent. All whilst existing under an imperialist system that has since further evolved. It's aimed to crush my beautiful black babies and many others who have or are yet to learn that they're apparently a problem. I have to consider being told by my secondary school careers advisor at the coming of the dawn of the millennium and the promise of Tony Blair's New Labour that the furthest I could wish for in the future was a 9-to-5 job working in an office or a bank. No disrespect to you who do. I have to consider the veiled bullying from so-called peers during my art undergrad in the early 2000s, that video games had no place in art canon. And alt geeky weirdos like me weren't serious enough. Constantly reminded of what my love for gaming, comics, movies, music, or vernacular cultures could never be: high art. I have to revisit being told by veterans and peers alike that I was unlikely to make it in the art scene due to being a young parent. But to also know that what they really meant was me being a young black kid from a low socio-economic background. Or told by curators that my making sample-driven beats, music, or DJing were not artistic practice. Or that if I did a PhD, maybe my practice might have some form of credibility or greater significance. I must also remember that regardless of whatever success I'm apparently reaping in my field as a practitioner, every day is still a fight for Hayley Joy Rose, mother of the council flat we raise our kids in. This property in Tower Hamlets, a place I partially grew up in. Due to the unreachable costs of living, I travel from Essex most days in the week. I've done this constantly for half a decade now to enable me to co-parent and raise these kids in a loving household. I consciously regiment my days in a way so that I can be a real and present parent. I must let the so-called career work around the responsibilities I have to them, my mum, and my youngest sister who has multiple disabilities. It's taken me a long time to understand for myself that people like me existing in an art scene that mostly favors white people and those who have generational wealth, people like us that come from the grime, also present a nightmare to the canon. An unacquired taste, an unpredictable, unconventional, gender-bending, and impossible thing to categorize. Well, guess what? In absolute spite of all the things which are part of an exhaustive list of fuckeries set to derail me and others, I am still here. Only just, mind. The point is, I am Okosieforua's son, my mother's son. And I'm a stubborn, stubborn bastard. And yet still, to this day, I'm advised what I should do or shouldn't do. Things I shouldn't protest or shout or complain or critique or point out. How by keeping quiet and not raising my head above the parapet, things would be easier, not just for myself, but others around me and those from similar backgrounds of a lesser privilege. Nah, that is not possible for me. To smile, nod, bend, and be formed into something other than me. No keeping calm and carrying on. I'm not that person, and that is not how my practice works. At times it is utterly exhausting. But my mother raised a fighter, and I will fight mine and my people's corner at every corner. I'm not a yes person. If it don't exist, build it. Reminds me of a moment that I'd experienced not so long ago. Earlier on in the summer, a young kid asked me a question during a talk at Tate Modern. Likely in their early 20s, similar London twang. It felt like I was looking in a mirror, just beaming with eager, raw energy, fizzy cocktail mixed with angst that had fermented, like they'd been waiting a while with bated breath to ask this person who might understand what it's like to be in the position that they're in. The question went a little something like this. I work with illustration, animation, and design. I'm in the early stages of what I'm doing. And I was wondering, how do you make sure what you're doing or saying is relevant? I listened, breathed in, held on to what was being asked of me. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. My cousin Shay Thompson, an accomplished writer and presenter who works in the field of gaming, nudged and asked, "You cool with that question?" Yeah, I'm fine. I just wanted some time to be able to, relay back. When people ask me questions at talks or symposia, I try not to rush the answer. Sometimes I feel like it turns into some competition-like moment to see how quick one's intellectual prowess can snap back, like an AI companion scraping the web for data. But this isn't the web, and I'm not a machine. And I want to be able to make sure that what I put out there, even if a pinch of sand might gather the weight to help hold this person where they stand, and that is what I'll do. Besides, so many of us in the Western realm are in so much of a rush to get somewhere, to be somewhere, to make it bigger, and so on, and so on, and so on. What's that all about? What's it all for? What am I fighting for? What are you fighting for? What the fuck are we fighting for? Anyway, my response landed a little something like this. Relevance. By your very existence, you are relevant. And I continued. Don't go searching for what apparently is relevant. If you do that, soon enough you'll be making what you think people want of you and not what you are wanting, searching, dreaming of. At which point I gestured towards my heart. Your story is what is relevant, and you need to give yourself the space and time to open up what that is and what that might mean. Believe me when I say this. If you do this, people will see the promise in that. But you must hold on to that belief, that potential, whatever it may be. Nobody can give you that self-determination. All right, so maybe I never quite said it bang on like that word for word, but I definitely drew along similar contours. It was a great question, a real question, one that I think is timeless, but has a greater resonance now more than ever before due to the social media-driven age in which few moments are sacred. Please don't misquote this as it coming from a technophobe or pessimist. The title of my book wouldn't be what it is after all, no? If it don't exist, build it. I do know, however, as a person who is part of the only generation to have experienced life without And then with mass access to the World Wide Web, mobile telecommunication, social media, et al., that it's increasingly difficult to find a space where you feel like you don't have to always be connected. Show what you're making as a practitioner. Show what you're thinking before the thing or the words that don't exist yet begin to form matter in the mind that is your universe. Just being is enough. You are enough. But speaking of just being, it seems trying to do just that in the UK these days brings with it more problems on top of many that those of us face. It's open season if you're black, a person of color, queer, trans, disabled, working class, or weren't born here. Hell, even being born here doesn't help, I'm afraid. Yes, I'm talking about April's UK Supreme Court ruling regarding the Equality Act that doesn't allow trans people to be equal. Yes, I'm talking about the mobilization of bigotry surrounding the racist riots that have taken place over the last year, with no signs of slowing down and stoked, of course, by our wonderful British media and politicians. Yes, I am talking about the cuts to universal credit and/or personal independence payments, which harms the vulnerable and those who are most in need. Yes, I am talking about a speech made this May by Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who echoed Conservative MP Enoch Powell's 1968 Rivers of Blood speech, that without tougher immigration controls, we risk becoming an island of strangers. Fuck out of here. When you quantify this and many other aspects of Western-driven tension formed around the fictional fear of the other, you might imagine me a seer, having established my Relic Traveller project in 2017. Relic Traveller is a multi-disciplinary project which manifests itself in performance, audio, moving image, and prose. Centered within themes related to Sanko time, which I'll explain in a moment, Relic Traveller takes place across various landscapes and locations. The project continues to build upon a post-colonial perspective informed by technology, agency, and the body, and narratives of migration. This speculative project continues to consider the social and political climate of recent times, the rise of nationalism within the global West, and tensions surrounding moments such as the United Kingdom's Leave Brexit vote in 2016. Meanwhile, the African Union's passport programme, also established in 2016, moves towards the opening of borders across a unified African continent. The Relic Traveller series aims to imagine a future in which the global West devolves to a point of decline. In this future, the African Union ascends into a prosperous and harmonious collective, free of Western interference and reliance, taking on responsibility in shaping the future of the planet. Long before its public launch of the ongoing project, resulting in films, animation, prose, and flag-presented symbols, reflecting a once-forgotten people and a promise of Pan-Africanism on a global scale, I asked myself a year prior, what might happen if the UK voted to leave in 2016? And how such a vote would inspire the likes of Trump to be elected into power approximately 6 months later, this resulting in a terrible wave of nationalism reverberating around Europe, and at a time unknown in the future, the West implodes, becoming a relic of itself. Funny though, how when the West fails, it apparently is meant to mean the end of the world for everyone else. In the early years of devising and pitching this project to potential partners and institutions, I must have come across like a mad professor. Everything between being too ambitious or too lazily confusing these ideas of mine with Afrofuturism. The project, however, like much of my work, operates around a term coined in 2017 titled Sanko time. The concept of Sanko time relates to the Ghanaian tree word Sankofa, which roughly translates to go back and get what has been left behind, and alludes to using the past, both known and unknown, as a guiding path to prepare for the future. If it don't exist, build it. All of the world building and seeing futures aside, what drove and still does me in telling these stories is the urgency behind them. My mum used to tell me and my siblings stories about her journeys, battles, interconnected with incredible tales around our heritage. The importance of knowledge of self. It never made sense to me at the time. She told us once that one day you will tell my stories. And that is why I and others do what we do. Not in response to the white enlightenment that racism exists, following their witnessing of the murder of George Floyd, when we had nowhere else to go but our LCD screens during the lockdown. As with such moments in time treated like a fashion or a festival, the sudden hunger for books, films, art and culture that guides the way from one moment, and then later someone then becomes the enemy of the state the next. Should they dare to talk about freedom for Palestine? Take the word woke, for example, and the way those that care not of others with lesser privilege scoff at things being too woke. Now insert the word, instead of woke, equitable, wherever you hear someone say those similar terms. It sounds stupid, doesn't it? Again, speaking of being woken and advocacy, it's also what you can see and join the dots, but what you cannot and what isn't being shown. Why are we not talking about Congo and Sudan? They're directly interlinked with the Palestinian struggle. Pan-Africanist leaders of the past, Lumumba and Nkrumah and others, realized this. Don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that certain lives matter less. I am saying, however, that activism in this day and age can get wrapped in trends and not the unending question of where does the fight go if it is not being joined by others or they are not interlinked. Yes, the genocide of Palestinians by Zionists is interconnected with the genocide of millions of the Congo, made to mine materials for the same bombs or same types of bombs that obliterated civilians historically in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, all the way to those in the West Bank today. That is without taking into consideration the continued genocide taking place of Black, trans and queer citizens, people of color, disabled and poor folk in the West, or even in being specific, right here in the UK. From discrepancies in healthcare to the industrial prison complex to education and the very cultures they built around us that are built by us, mostly Black people, only to be socially sanitized later on. Doing what artists do isn't about hitting budgets or demographic numbers, convincing governments we are worthy of monetary support. I'm not going to pretend that a budget doesn't help, but that is not what will drive the heart. That is something else altogether. Being edgy for the sake of it or trying to become some sort of character as an influencer's job. We have enough of those to entertain us online. What we do has the power to shift things that some might think unimaginable. And yes, we are dangerous. So dangerous that the Conservative government bulldozed our education, something that I've witnessed in real time. In many state schools, the provisions for art are evaporating somewhere between Key Stage 1 and 3, whether a reduction in opportunities for learning offered during lesson time, or additionally, the erasure of after-school activities because of this decreased school funding. This is setting up a system where only the middle and upper classes can afford access to the arts, a form of disenfranchisement and injustice, the consequences of which are left by my own children and those of the new generations to come. My dear eldest child is a perfect case study. Beautiful black young boy, part of the COVID generation of kids who lost years of their childhood, made to just chin up and get on with it when the panic was over. However, for him and those with disabilities and immunocompromising conditions, he couldn't just get back to business as usual. He couldn't get back to school for 3 years. Didn't get to finish primary school or say goodbye to his friends. He started secondary school and very soon after had to make his GCSE options. Having G6PD deficiency and asthma-like respiratory issues, most times he could only manage 2 or 3 days of school at best. His body just wouldn't let him. Despite Haley Joy and my best efforts to get the help, he is a British citizen who's owed it after all. He's been failed by the local doctors, hospitals, and the school. To this day, he still has not received any solid support for his disability. And lastly, as I just said, but will say again, failed by his school teachers who mostly expected the equivalent of E or F grades for his GCSE exams. Haley and I were angry. We argued, raged, cried, but did what families in our position with no support tend to do. If it don't exist, build it. We created a plan for Sinai. Getting extra tuition through specialist books, we began relearning Spanish through a phone app to help encourage his language studies. Still doing my Duolingo. True story. Made a study plan based on a work reward system that helped me when I was a child. I'm proud looking back at what we did, but it shouldn't have to be this way in a so-called first world country. Sinai applied to a level 3 course in games design. I know what some of you are thinking who know my practice, and I did not push him into it, I promise. A course that has a pathway to university or employment in gaming, a subject that is so dear to his heart. In the lead up to GCSE Day, Sinai requested that I not accompany him to his results. I was somewhat sad, but proud in the same breath. Come GCSE Day, I got a call from his mum. "What's wrong?" I asked. "He did great," Haley said. "I don't get it, what's wrong then?" The problem was Sinai felt he'd been robbed of a genuine school experience. For the years COVID had stolen from him, he also felt robbed by the very school he finished at, which didn't show faith in his potential. A school of high attainment, mind you. Sinai had, at the last minute, a thought of doing A-levels at his school, but they required 5 Bs or above, he only had 4. Sinai absolutely smashed it. He finished with the following. He got an A, a B, 2 B minuses, 4 Cs, and a D. Phenomenal, whether a COVID kid or not, disabilities or not, institutional racism or not. And yet he was heartbroken because he felt he wasn't good enough. He no longer felt like the gaming course was of value, even though the opposite was true. He began speaking of gaming as a hobby at best. Sound familiar? The tragedy in this was not that Sinai had changed his mind on what he wanted to maybe study. Kind of last minute, but it's kids, right? The tragedy was in a school system that failed to truly support or even celebrate him and others like him when the GCSE dust had settled. Sinai's going to be all right. He's going to do the first year of the gaming course and will then weigh his options, as he will at least have the equivalent of an A-level and experience in the field he is interested in. I've got to be frank, however. The thing that I find unsettling was the comment of the art form of gaming being a hobby at best. I've seen the governmental education system make people feel like art isn't a future, especially for people like us, coming from where we come from. I've battled it, faced off, seemingly won, and yet here, the institution managed to multiply yet once more with ugly faces, coming for our children. Does the house really always win? Successive governments, both the current leadership and those who have come before it, tried to categorize and label and value art art in a way of what it brings to the economy. They do a shoddy job at it. They don't see the behind the scenes of arts programming that may be a lifeline to families affected for generations by the country's military-industrial complex. The consequences of not truly rehabilitating soldiers who have returned from tours to a world they no longer know how to fit into. They don't witness the vital work done through lockdown to keep trans and queer migrants who are made strangers to this country in helping create platforms for their voices to be heard, turned into podcasts, so that others interconnected through shared struggles will not feel alone. My goodness, what we do is fucking important, especially in these current testing times. And as dramatic as it may sound, I do believe that art is the last bastion for the fight to the right of our humanity. And I'm not talking about things that are simply placed in institutions. I hope you can read beyond the words. So here I part with these. Those who put themselves in the line, and in various ways, those inside of institutions, outside of institutions, some of which you will hear from throughout today. Youngers, elders, and those of us in between. I salute you. I'm in awe of you. And finally, those of ample privilege, sitting on the bench, to wait if the wind blows in a direction where it might be safe to speak up, or for them to use their talents, their voices, their wealth. I say this, pull your fucking socks up if it don't exist. Thank you.